what's this doing here? What even is this? This is a... Oh, it's a Toshiba 250 gigabyte drive. Could that be from my old Aspire? Yes, it is actually. This was the drive that was in the old home theater PC, in case you didn't watch the previous video. It's hooked up to my USB 3.0 controller that's from one of my other external hard drives. It's temporarily here. But what could it possibly be hooked up to? Well, that's what it's hooked up to. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Did you really get one of those mini PCs? Yes, I did really get one of those mini PCs. There's not a whole lot of uses for these things, but there is one legitimate use, and that is for a home theater PC, or at least a media center. A real home theater PC would probably be a slightly better machine for gaming and doing all sorts of other intense things, but this is just for basically watching videos, maybe the odd PowerPoint or slideshow or something like that. But I'm actually impressed with this thing. This is a Minis Forum mini PC, and it is just about the cheapest one you can buy on Amazon. There might be one model that's cheaper, and then this one comes in two varieties. It comes in, they're both 32 gigabytes of storage, but you can get the 2 gigabyte model in terms of memory, 2 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes. This is the 4 gigabyte model, so 4 gigabytes of memory, DDR3 I believe, and I opted for that because the Aspire had 2 gigabytes and it just wasn't cutting it. So 4 gigabytes of RAM, pretty decent for something like this. Now when I took it out of its box and I took a few pictures to show you, I was very impressed because aside from actually giving you directions on how to operate it and some other, boring stuff like the power supply, they actually gave you an HDMI cable. I have never seen a computer that comes with an HDMI cable, especially one that doesn't come with a monitor. Do you remember that Dell XPS I did a video on where I replaced the motherboard? That thing came with its Dell monitor. The monitor supports HDMI, and so does the computer. Its graphics card has an HDMI port on it. But what did they give us? They gave us a VGA cable to connect it. And that's been the case for a long time. Most manufacturers don't supply HDMI cables just because they're too expensive. They've come down in price some, but they used to be like 40 bucks for a 5-foot cable. This actually gave us one, and I'm very impressed with the fact that they did that. And also in terms of I/O, this thing's impressive. A lot of mini PCs don't have a whole lot of I/O. This one does. This one has, first of all, has USB 3.0, and that's because you need some way to expand the storage. So you can plug a flash drive into that, and a USB 3.0 flash drive, and have quite a bit of fast storage. Get like a 128 gigabyte stick, which is probably what I'll do. There's also a memory card slot here if you want to do storage that way. You can see two USB 2.0 ports on the front. That's the dongle for the wireless keyboard that I had used in the past. And this also has VGA, which is very handy because when I set this up, I do so at my desk. Whenever I set any computer up, I typically do it at my desk, and I have a VGA only monitor, so having that is very handy, especially for a cheap PC. You wouldn't think they'd give you two display outputs, but they do. In terms of internal specs, this thing has an Intel Atom processor. I think it's it's quad core, I believe, but it's only 1 point something gigahertz. It's very low end, but it gets the job done. It's actually a lot better than the AMD that was in the Aspire. And yeah, the best thing about this is I don't have to reach behind a television and not hit the keyboard. I just hit this button and it turns on. That was the main reason I went with this instead of another laptop, is because the convenience factor, really. Oh yeah, this thing also has an RJ45 for hardwired Ethernet, which is essential for a lot of people, especially if you're going to be doing something like a server. Although, if you're going to run a server on something this small and this weak, you're probably better off doing so with a Raspberry Pi. The only reason you'd want to have this is if you need Windows for the server, because obviously the Raspberry Pi can't run Windows or any of the other single board computers that I know of anyway. But yeah, this thing's hooked up just like the old one to HDMI. And I have this plugged in right now just because this still has all of the old media files on it. Eventually I will get something that's less ridiculous, but you know. This is passively cooled, which has me nervous. It has integrated Wi-Fi as well, up to 802.11n. So, you know, it's not bleeding edge, but you really need AC on something like this, especially if you hardwire it? Probably not. I am using the Wi-Fi right now. I would love to be using Ethernet, but I just don't want to have to run a cable all the way through the basement into the next room. Don't want to be drilling holes and doing all that. It's just, I'm too lazy. Anyway. So this is a great value. This was only $150, and if you got the 2GB model, it's only $100, I think. So, very inexpensive. And it comes with Windows 10, but here's the part where the waters get muddy. A lot of people in their reviews claim that Windows 10 is not activated, or that the activation goes away after a period of time. And I just wouldn't run with Windows, the build of Windows 10 that they give you on here. And yeah, I had quite an ordeal yesterday. I spent half my day trying to get a different OS on here. So guess what OS is on there now? You want to guess? Windows 10. Yeah, but not their build. I used my copy, which is from 2015, so you can still disable a bunch of the telemetry and the other garbage like Cortana, and not have to talk to it to get things installed or any of that nonsense. Also, I don't really trust, like, considering the fact that the activation was screwing up on most of these things, I don't really trust that the copy they send you isn't free of their own proprietary malware or whatever. They seem relatively trustworthy as a company, but you never know. So, I tried to put Windows 8 on here, or 8.1, but little did I know that this thing didn't accept 32-bit architecture OSs. And so I put 8.1 onto a flash drive, and I spent probably close to 45 minutes trying to get it to boot. I was rearranging things in the BIOS, and I disabled everything except the USB stick that I was trying to boot from, and it would still boot into Windows 10. The BIOS on this thing, which I will show you later on, it ignores, like, if it can't honor what you have set for it, it just kind of defaults to the boot drive, which is weird. It's a very weird way of doing things. Very odd BIOS. But yeah, it wouldn't boot because it was a 32-bit install. So I was sitting around thinking, well, what should I install on it? I don't want to do Windows 10, which, spoiler alert, that's what's on there. I had a copy of Windows 7 that's 64-bit, but it's OEM, and I would have to burn an image, or rather rip an image off of that, and then burn that onto a USB stick, which I actually ended up doing that, and it took probably an hour and a half to do that just because the OEM copy was like 5 gigabytes. It was a dual-layer DVD. And guess what? That didn't work. It booted in to the USB stick, but it got stuck at the that part in the Windows 7 boot sequence when the Windows logo is flying in. So it was like loading files, and then it got stuck there. It glitched out, and it was just frozen. And I tried it a few times. It just wouldn't work. If I had used a retail copy, maybe it would have worked, but the only retail copy of Windows 7 I have is 32-bit, so yeah. So I said, well, I got a copy of Windows 8 that's 64-bit around here somewhere, but that has the same install process, or at least, you know, at the very beginning, it's the exact same boot up process as the Windows 7 installer, if you don't already know that. It still has the Windows logo flying in. So I said, well, if it got stuck on that in Windows 7, there's a good chance it might also do that on Windows 8. And I did not feel like spending another hour ripping it off of the DVD and putting it onto the flash drive, so yeah. Because there is no optical drive in this. I can't use the optical media. Anyhow, I did the Windows 7 thing. I tried Ubuntu. Ubuntu installed, but it froze after the installation trying to boot into it, so they actually warn you not to install Linux on this thing, and I figured it was just because of, you know, lack of driver support, but apparently it just doesn't play nicely with it, so yeah. I wanted Windows on this anyway. So after, debating it and driving myself crazy for another few minutes, I said, okay, fine, I'll put Windows 10 on here, but I'm doing it on my terms. So it's got Windows 10 on here, but it's on my terms. And then came a whole nother can of worms trying to install the drivers. I had downloaded the drivers before I even attempted doing any of this, just because I didn't know if they even had the drivers available. They did. Downloaded in a zip file. I was like, okay, great. So now I'm free to install whatever I want, right? Got Windows 10 installed. It booted in just fine. Most of the things that are essential were working. The USB ports were working. Default graphics driver. You know the story. Go into Device Manager, and damn near everything is an unknown device. It doesn't even recognize the devices and just say, there's no driver for these. It's unknown device for half the stuff, including the wireless card, including the memory card reader, graphics driver, obviously, because it was using the default generic driver. Several other things just weren't working. Luckily, the USB ports are working just fine, because I've actually had some issues with things like that in the past. Anyway, I said, well, okay, let's try to install the drivers then. So I just said update drivers, and I pointed the updater towards the folder that had all the drivers in it, and only one of them got found. Out of like 20 things, the audio driver, or the audio adapter found its driver within the folder. Nothing else would. So I said, oh great, well I'm going to have to do this manually, aren't I? Then I looked in the driver folder, and none of the drivers had manual, exe installers. So I was like, oh great, what do I do now? Long story short, I ended up using Driver Pack Solutions to install the drivers, and it did a fantastic job, but it still took quite a bit of hassle to get the Wi-Fi working on here. Everything's working now, but man, what a can of worms. I would not recommend that you buy one of these if you're not, if you have no computer skills whatsoever, because that's the main target audience, is people who have very little computer skills. They buy these things just to have something that's up and running in a few minutes. If you're actually looking to do something that you customize, and you're not wanting to use the default Windows 10 on here, don't even think about getting this if you don't know too much about how computers operate. Anyway, let's take a look at what's on there. It's not fully set up yet, but I'm getting there. Okay, so we're on HDMI 2. Now for those, in case you do decide to buy this, the first time that you plug this in, or actually every time that you plug it in if it's been unplugged, you have to hold the power button for like 2 or 3 seconds in order for it to be able to be turned on. And then you have to hit it again after that to turn it on normally. So we'll turn it on, and we will boot into... Is it coming to life? Okay, so now we will boot into Windows. The BIOS, or the post sequence, is very slow on here. I should also mention that the internal storage is a 32 gigabytes chip that's soldered directly, so it's not an SSD. It is flash memory, so it's a little bit faster than a hard drive, but not quite as fast as a regular real SSD would be. Also, when it dies, good luck getting the computer to work after that. It's the odds are not stacked in your favor, just because it's soldered right on there. So that's the only problem with these things, is they're very disposable. But, if it lasts 5 years, that's good enough for me. Anyway, here's our Windows 10 login screen. You can see Wi-Fi is up and running now. Thank goodness for that. And I'll log in to my account. I almost showed... I don't care if you see the password. You're not going to come to my house and log into it. So I have an admin account and the home theater account. Account. Is that what they're calling it nowadays? Who knows? So you can see it's not quite as fast as a normal SSD would be. It took a minute for the dock to come up and all that. But it is a lot faster than the Aspire was, and it's still faster than 5400 RPM drives, which I'm used to, so I'm very happy with the speed myself. And you can see I've already installed a lot of software on here. Still got a lot of things to customize. Got the gadget pack installed, all my browsers, all of that. I just need to get a storage device for the for all my media, all my movies and TV shows and whatnot. So let's do a test using Pale Moon. So Pale Moon is a Firefox derivative, if you don't already know that, and it's based off of older versions of Firefox, but they keep it updated for security and whatnot. You can see it uses the classic theme, and it's a lot lighter on resources than newer versions of Firefox are. So if you're looking to run Firefox on older hardware, I highly recommend this. This would run buttery smooth, well, comparatively speaking anyway, on the Aspire. It was still a pain to use, but it was a lot better than Firefox, let me tell you. Even it's better than Quantum even. But anyway, enough shilling for Pale Moon. Typing with one hand is fun. Not. So you can see YouTube loads in a decent amount of time. It's not going to break any records, but it's a lot faster than I'm used to, actually, on most of my computers. It actually is about the same speed loading YouTube as my Inspiron, so very good there. And also, this thing will do HD. This will do up to 1080p just fine. It advertises that it can do 4K. Don't even think about trying to drive a 4K display with that thing. Other people have tried. It's just not up to the task. But 1080p, it will work just fine, at least here and now in 2018. When the software engineers who design websites begin to bloat these up even more, because it's like an arms race of how much CSS and JavaScript and other crap they can jam into these pages. Eventually, it won't be that great of an experience. But right now it's okay. And you'll notice we're also using the classic version of YouTube because Pale Moon automatically inserts the disable polymer or whatever, so it should be a little bit faster for us. But HTML5 is HTML5. Let's bring up my channel. So here we are at my channel, and we're going to use the Windows 10 AME video, because I actually did try to put that on there, but it is 32-bit, so yeah, that would have been great if that worked. That was another failed attempt. But hey, you live and you learn. Anyway, actually that's not the best video to demonstrate the graphics rendering on here, is it? We'll try the pre-Thanksgiving edition of Dan Rambles, and my goodness, it's been that long since I've put up videos regularly, hasn't it? It's mostly a lack of ideas. If I had ideas on what to do, I would do it. I would put videos up more often, that is. Alright, let's pause that so I can think. Turn off autoplay. Go full screen. Oh, it's not going to go full screen because I have to click on the active thing. Okay. So here we are full screen, and let's see what resolution we're at. I think this is, I only uploaded this in 720, so yeah. So we'll just make sure that we're in 720. Okay. And let's play the video, shall we?
The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, we're getting closer and closer.
So that's working pretty well. The camera that I recorded this on is a little jittery, so it's, and also the this rendered at I think 24 frames per second, so it's gonna look like there's drop frames. That's the actual video, but you can see that in terms of artifacting and in terms of lag, there's not very much. The Aspire would never be able to do this. The Aspire would just get stuck on like every 5 frames. It would be a train wreck. So that's working. And audio is also, you know, no complaints about that. There's no weird, it's not software controlled. Of course, I'm using, what is it? I'm using the HDMI, so it's going right through the HDMI cable, but the headphone port on there is not software controlled. It's an old style one, so you won't have to fiddle around with any stupid drivers for that. So yeah, YouTube works just fine, and so does other HD video sources, which I already mentioned. And can't think of too much else to say about this. I've pretty much covered, I mean, it's a home theater PC, right? Not much that I can say about this that I didn't say in my old video. So, yep. Just thought I'd update you guys on the state of affairs. I'm very happy with the purchase, and yeah, Windows 10 isn't too bad when you're using it for something that's, you know, not a serious use case. So there you go. I'll see you guys in the next video, whenever that is.